Welcome back to Tertium Rejects. Today, we need to talk about the Boltgun. This weapon was once the pinnacle of veteran gameplay and would shred anything that you pointed it at. But with the class overhaul patch in patch 13, the bolter kinda got left behind, especially for the veteran class. It has a slow reload animation and a long draw time, and its damage isn't quite high enough to offset those two disadvantages. And it doesn't help that it's kinda outshined by the plasma gun in the current version of the game. But all that said, I can still seriously tell you that it is an amazing weapon that has really high carry potential even in Auric missions. We just have to polish it up first by using some creative talents and play to the Boltgun's strengths. Those being its burst fire capability, its high boss damage, and its ability to kill any elite or special in the game in 2 to 4 hits. It also really helps if we play with some discipline and patience. For instance, you should almost never just lay on the trigger with the bolt gun. That's how I see most people just run out of ammo. You're not going to hit anything because the accuracy is just terrible, and there's just better ways to do it, and I'll show you how. There's quite a few ways you can use your talent tree to get more out of the bolt gun, but I'll be sharing with you my personal favorite way to run this incredibly fun and iconic 40k weapon, along with a few optional talent choices. If you liked what you saw in the intro, then strap yourselves in for a deep dive on the bolt gun in Darktide. Before we hop into the meat of the guide, so the talents, perks, blessings, all that good stuff, there are two quick things I really need to mention about the bolt gun. It has two enormous weaknesses, and that's its reload speed and its draw time. So for the reload speed, as you can see, I'm going to hold down right click while this animation is going. It takes forever to be able to fire the weapon again, but we can overcome this with a little bit of an animation cancel, and it's not hard to do. So all you're going to do is you're going to listen for an audio cue. You see this charging handle on the bolt gun? When your guy pulls it back, you'll hear a click. As soon as you hear that click, you can swap to your melee weapon and the bolter will be fully loaded once again. So here we go, we unload, load it in, pull back, and as you can see, 15 rounds in the chamber. Or 15 rounds in the gun. So that's how you overcome the slow reload speed, because what you can do is you don't usually animation cancel to then pull out the bolt gun. Usually what you do is you're up close, you're fighting something, and then you need to reload, and you're getting attacked, you hear that noise, pull out the melee weapon and go to work. That's how we're going to be utilizing that. The other big weakness of the bolt gun is its draw time. I'll do the same thing as I did with the reload, holding right click as I draw the weapon so you can see how long it takes to fire. So it's about a second and a half of you not being able to do anything. You also can't use the weapon's special ability. If I'm spamming clicking it, you can see how long it takes to go off. So to overcome this, we're taking Executioner Stance, because this is going to let us be a lot more flexible in weaving between melee and ranged combat. So as you saw, this is what it looks like with Executioner Stance. It is instant. You instantly pull up your weapon and you can fire it. This really overcomes the two biggest weaknesses of the bolt gun. So thank you for your patience. Now let's get into the fun part of the guide, and if you've liked the content so far, consider dropping a like and subscribe. So to start this guide off, we'll talk about the talents, because there's a little bit of wiggle room in how you can build this talent tree. I do think running Executioner Stance is the optimal way to play the bolter. It's just voice of command is a really good skill, but it just doesn't synergize at all with the bolter. Like, it gives you a little bit more space so you can work with the reload and stuff like that, but it has no way to overcome the draw time or any of the other big weaknesses with the bolter. Your damage will also be lower if you run voice of command. It's not a bad option, it's just not how I prefer to play it. So that all said, this is the first talent tree we're going to be taking a look at. Here's the full tree for the first version of the build we're going to be going with, but I'll be leaving it up on screen for a little while, but if you need to check it later, feel free to check the description below, and there will be a link to the game's Lantern version where you can, reference it anytime you need. So to talk through the key points, we're taking Shredder frag grenades because they're great. They're probably the best grenades in the game. But what they really let us do is buy time for ourselves. If there's a big group coming and our gun is empty, we can throw a frag grenade and reload. If we're getting swamped by a horde and we're not able to cleave through it on our own particularly fast, we can throw a grenade, reload our weapon, and blaze away at whatever is causing us problems. It's also great if you see like a big pack of maulers coming in, you can throw a frag grenade just to stagger them and buy a little bit of extra time for your team. So overall, just a great grenade. We're taking it mostly to buy time. For our aura, we're going to be taking Scavenger, and I don't like this, but we kind of have to. The Bolter is very ammo hungry. If you don't take Scavenger, you're going to constantly run out of ammo, and there's not really a good way to mitigate that. Even if you're very disciplined with your fire and you don't use full auto and you pick your shots, it's still pretty ammo hungry, and anytime you run into a boss, you're going to be using 2 to 3 mags every time, so that'll also eat through your ammo really quickly. So we kind of have to take Scavenger in this particular build. Next up, we have Executioner Stance. I already touched on this a little bit in the first part of the video, but Executioner Stance really fixes the draw time problem with the Bolter, because you can be primarily in melee, like, meleeing anything that comes close to you, pop Executioner Stance, and instantly fire off that Bolter. So you see a big line of maulers coming in, press F and just kill them all. Like, you fire in 2-round bursts, each burst should kill a mauler, and it's just great. That's the main reason we're taking Executioner Stance. Another small benefit to Executioner Stance I just wanted to briefly mention is that it does make you completely immune to suppression. So there's no need to take Determined in any Bolter build that you're taking Executioner Stance with, because you're already immune to suppression. So just be aware of that and don't take that talent if you're running Executioner Stance. But to help keep the Executioner Stance going and get as much uptime on it as possible, we're also going to be taking Relentless, which is something you should always take if you take Executioner Stance. And as a little bit of a controversial choice, we're also taking Counterfire. Now, some people are not going to like this, but I have a good reason. We're not taking it to deal with little shooter enemies. There's other ways you can do that. You can throw frag grenades at them, you can close the distance in melee. You don't have to shoot them with the Boltgun. But what it does do is it makes it really easy to keep Executioner Stance up, because there's almost always some random little shooter that you can just quickly pop 1 round into for another 5 seconds of counterfire. And to me, that trade-off is worth the single point to have a lot more uptime on Executioner Stance. But there is a version of the build where I don't use it, so if you really don't like it, don't worry, there's something in here for you too. Lastly, we're going to be ending with our keystone, which is going to be Focused Fire. We're going to be taking with it Target Down and Redirect Fire. Target Down, I really like, because we're running Executioner Stance, so we don't have an easy way to just bring our toughness back. But this gives us an on-demand form of toughness regeneration, and it's pretty easy to have like 2 stacks. If you pay attention, you can see the stacks going up. They go up pretty quickly, so it's pretty reliable way to regenerate toughness and stamina, which pairs really well with Deadshot if you want to run Deadshot as well. I'm not running it in this particular one, but the other version of the build does run Deadshot. But I've been playing around with it, and I really like keeping Target Down in both versions, so that's why it's staying here. So now that we've covered the meat of the build, let's get into the rest of it. So I'm going to start off with what I call utility talents. These are things that make us harder to kill, make our lives easier, that kind of thing. We'll cover more like damage and offensive talents right after this. So to start off with, we're going to look at Volley Adept. Volley Adept gives you 30% reload speed whenever you kill an elite or special enemy. Since the Bolter is really only going to be coming out whenever there are elites or specials, this is really easy to activate, so you can pretty much count on it almost every time you need to reload. There's very few instances where you won't have it up. Another option is you can choose to take Tactical Reload on the other side of the tree, but I'm not a big fan of this one just because it requires even more discipline to not empty your weapon to get the benefit. And I'm just not as much of a fan of it as I am with Volley Adept. It just seems less reliable, if that makes sense. Now, you can take both to make the reload speed on the Bolter actually pretty good. Like, it's not that painful anymore. But I find that kind of encourages bad habits, and it's also just not strictly necessary. So if something's not strictly necessary, we're going to cut it out of the build to try to optimize it. But if you want to run both, you can. I just think that it kind of encourages you to use more ammunition, which kind of exacerbates the whole Bolter is really ammo hungry problem. Next up, we have Close Orders Kill Zone and Confirmed Kill. These talents are going to help keep us safe and keep our toughness from breaking a lot of the time. Close Orders Kill Zone is going to give you 33% toughness damage reduction based on how many allies are in coherency with you, and since you're playing an Executioner Stance Bolter veteran, you really want to be in the middle of your team as often as possible, so you're going to get a lot of mileage out of this. As for Confirmed Kill, this is a very reliable way to regenerate toughness. It's extremely easy to use since you're playing a veteran. Mostly what you're doing is killing elites and specials, so getting 10% toughness back on every kill plus another 20% over 10 seconds is quite a lot of toughness to be regenerating throughout the course of a game. So Confirmed Kill is a really good choice to help keep yourself safe. Get back in the fight is another good one for keeping us alive. It gives you 50% of your stamina back and 6 seconds of stun immunity whenever your toughness is broken. This is usually enough time for you to reposition yourself if you got it broken from like ranged enemies, or if you're in melee, the extra stamina coming back is going to help a lot with blocking and pushing and that sort of thing. Fully loaded is going to make sure that we can keep firing bolts from our bolter and not run out of ammo by giving us 25% additional ammo. This synergizes really nicely with Scavenger because it just gives you more ammo back over time since your ammo pool is bigger and Scavenger gives you a percentage of your ammo back. Next, we have Keep Their Heads Down. This is one I don't often take, but I really like taking it on the Bolter, because one thing that is a problem with the Bolter is, Darktide is a game where you really need to be mobile, and it's hard to do that when you're hanging back, picking shots like you see here. So what Keep Their Heads Down does, along with the node that precedes it, is gives you 75% suppression on your weapon, on a weapon that already has very high suppression. This makes it so when you're firing the bolter in melee with a bunch of stuff around you, as long as it's not behind you, every time you fire, everything near you is going to get suppressed. And so you can kind of play a little bit more aggressively. You don't need to worry about like a poxwalker breaking your toughness while you're trying to aim at a trapper. It just isn't an issue when you take these talents. So having the extra suppression, while normally is kind of a meh talent, it's not really a good one in most cases. If the weapon has really high suppression and good penetration, it's actually very good. So definitely give this one a try, at least if you haven't done so before. Now, I really think that any veteran build needs to have some form of grenade regen. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm not the god of Darktide. I don't make the rules. If you want to go a build without grenade regen, go for it. But for me personally, I think one of the things that makes Veteran special is it is the only class with access to grenade regen, proper grenade regen. Not talking about, the Ogryn Rock, as hilarious as that one is. So we're taking Demolition Team because we're already going down the middle tree, and it's just an extra point, whereas if we're going to take Grenade Tinker, or the one that gives you a grenade back every 60 seconds, we'd have to spend 2 talent points. So we're just going to go with Demolition Team just to make sure that we always have a frag grenade if we need it. Then we have Iron Will. This is a pretty staple talent in a lot of veteran builds, and I think it works really nicely here because we have so many different ways to regenerate our toughness. So it's, relatively easy to keep your toughness above that 75%, so you're getting that full benefit out of Iron Will. For the last of the utility talents, we're going to be taking Target Down. This is not a talent I've used a lot in the past, and I'm kind of regretting it. I only used it because I was trying really hard to make a bolter guide for y'all that actually frickin' worked and didn't require like an insane amount of skill. This is, as simple as I could make it, and I think that Target Down really kind of assists in that, because what it does is for every stack of focus target you apply to an enemy, you'll get some stamina and toughness back based on how many stacks it was. Now the really nice thing about this is it doesn't have to be you that kills the target, and it also gives it to your entire team. So whenever you need stamina or you need toughness, just tag something that's nearby a teammate, they'll kill it, and all of you get the benefit. So it's a really nice kind of team play one, but we're mostly taking it as another form of stamina and toughness regeneration, because a lot of the time you are going to need to be blocking with your melee weapon and doing push blocks and stuff like that, so running out of stamina is a pretty frequent occurrence, especially if you run Deadshot. So yeah, that's all the utility talents. Now let's look at the more like offensively oriented talents. First up, we have Longshot and Kill Zone. These are both situational damage boosts, but they do come up pretty often. For Longshot, it's going to give you up to 20% damage based on how far away the target is. This is kind of the opposite of the Zealot talent, so it gives you more damage the further away you are from the target. This is a nice little damage boost, and it makes it so if you're in the right space distance, you can 2-shot Maulers with Executioner Stance Up rather than 3-shot them. If you're too close, then you have to stack up your Blessing before you're able to do that. But with Longshot, as long as you're about 8 meters away, about 10 meters away, you can 2-shot them. So this is a nice little damage boost to have. It's not always going to be up, but we need it to get volley at up, so it's good. Then we have Kill Zone. This is also pretty situational. It's going to give you 15% extra range damage when there's no enemies within 8 meters of you. This is not going to come up super often, but I think a lot of people underestimate how often in Darktide you have a lot of enemies in front of you and no enemies behind you. This is if you're like coming out of an elevator, or you're after a dead drop, or you're overlooking a dead drop. Like, these types of situations happen a lot, and when they do happen, this damage boost really does boost up your damage a lot, like as far as hitting breakpoints go. For instance, if you're overlooking a new area you're about to drop in, you can one-shot scab gunners with it, or dread gunners with it. It'll one-shot both of them just to the body. You don't even have to hit them in the head. So it's a nice little damage boost. And also the other talent, I think it's called Opening Salvo, I'll post it up here, is just bad. I'm not a big fan of it. I know some people like it. It does have a little bit of synergy with Deadshot, but 10% crit on the first, what, 2 rounds in the gun, it's bad. I don't like it at all. If you want to run it, it's fine, but I really prefer Killzone. Then we have a staple of pretty much any veteran build, Precision Strikes and Superiority Complex. You don't have to take both of these, but I do in most of my builds. Precision Strikes is giving you 30% weak spot damage. Just straight up, melee and range. 30% weak spot damage. Simple, easy, you love it. Superiority Complex, kind of the same deal. 15% extra damage against elite enemies. So shotgunners, gunners, crushers, maulers, ragers, they're all elite enemies. So this is just giving you a flat 15% damage boost. So yeah, these two are just great. They do more damage. There's not much more to say about them. Then we have Rending Strikes and Bring It Down. Rending Strikes is not one that I take very often, but in this build it actually works really well because of a blessing we're taking on our bolter, Shattering Impact. These two put together, it lets you 3-shot crushers, and if you get a crit, you can do it to the body as well. You don't even have to hit him in the head. So this is a nice breakpoint to have, because if you're at the right distance, or you have at least some of your modifiers active, you can easily kill in Crusher in 4 shots, even to the body. So this is a really nice kind of breakpoint enabling talent in Rending Strikes. It does also give us rending to our melee weapon, but I'm going to be using a power sword. It doesn't benefit that much from it, but if you're using a different melee weapon, this is going to be a little bit better on that. And then for Bring It Down, it's just another straight up damage boost, just 20% damage to Ogrins and Monstrosities. Well, guess what we love killing as a Executioner Stance Bolter veteran? Ogrins and Monstrosities. So yeah, this is an obvious pick. To wrap up this version of the build, let's take a look at the Bolter. So for this one, we're going to be using Flak and Maniac damage. Now, you can swap out Maniac for Carapace, and it will work pretty well, but it's a little bit more niche, because it's hard to hit Maulers in the head with this weapon, and honestly, you don't even really want to. So the only enemy that Carapace is going to benefit you with is going to be Crushers. It does take the breakpoint down from 4 to 3. If you take Carapace, and you can even get a 2-shot if you get both crits in the head, but I don't really think it's worth it, because if you don't have Maniac damage, you're not going to be one-shotting Maniacs to the head, and also Dread Ragers are going to take 3 shots instead of 2. So Maniac is pretty important to take on the Bolter, especially because it is so slow that we want to be able to quickly deal with specials when they do spawn, and Dread Ragers are also, always kind of a problem. So Maniac is a must, and Flak damage is really going to kill Maulers specifically. It also helps against Gunners and all the other elites that wear Flak armor. Flak armor is the most common armor type in the game, but it specifically helps a lot with Maulers. When there's a big spawn of Maulers, the Bolter can actually kill them faster than the Plasma Gun in certain circumstances. If you're running Executioner Stance Plasma Gun and you do a charge shot, it will one-shot all of them, but the Bolter is pretty damn close. In one magazine, you can kill a lot of Maulers as long as you have Flak damage on. Just make sure you're aiming for the body and not for the head. The head is really difficult to hit, and if you do hit it, it's Carapace, so you're going to be doing less damage. So it's actually better in this instance to shoot Maulers in the body. For our blessings, we're going to take Shattering Impact to give us stacks of brittleness on the target. This reduces their armor. At Shattering Impact 4, you're reducing their armor by 20%, and combined with the 10% that we get from Rending Strikes in our talent tree, you're getting 30% penetration with your weapon, which is very strong, especially against heavily armored targets like Crushers. For the other blessing, we're going to be taking Pinning Fire. This isn't as good as it used to be, but I think Blaze Away is just a dead blessing on this weapon now. It's so inefficient, and you're going to have to use so much of your ammo to get access to it. I think that Pinning Fire is really the only realistic damage boost that you can take with the Bolter, so that's why we're taking it. It also does let us hit breakpoints. Like I said, if you have even, I think it's 2 stacks of Staggering Impact stacked up, you can one-shot shotgunners to the body. And also, it stacks extremely fast. If you fire one round into a horde, it'll be fully stacked because it staggers everything around it, and you get all the stacks from staggering the enemies. So it's really easy to just get that straight up 25% power increase on the bolter, which is obviously fantastic. To round out this part of the build, or this version of the build, we're going to talk a little bit about Curios. I like to run 1 stamina, 1 health, and 1 toughness. This is something I run with almost every build that I do. There are exceptions, but usually I have a reason for it. In this one, the extra stamina is really nice because, frankly, you need it to block. Even if you're not taking dead shot, you're slow, you're squishy, you need to be able to block, and having that extra stamina curio really helps with running around the map and making sure that you don't get, bonked by a rager or even just poxwalkers too easily. For the perks on them, I always take toughness regeneration because as a veteran, as a bolter veteran especially, you really want to be in the middle of your team. So this is going to be going off quite frequently, and you're also not going to be always in melee. You're going to want to be in melee when you can, and then when you see a big scary threat like a line of ragers or shotgunners or whatever, you step back and you start shooting them. And then while you're doing that, your toughness will be coming back very quickly. Then we're going to be taking stamina regeneration. Same reason. Stamina is kind of hard to come by as a veteran. It's the worst class in the game for stamina, so the stamina regeneration really helps a lot. And then lastly, we're taking damage resistance against gunners because one of the worst things to have happen to you is just a bunch of little crappy shooters just strip you of your toughness and then you just start to die because your health pool is very low. You have no damage reduction when your toughness is broken, and so we really don't want ranged enemies breaking our toughness. So that's why we're taking damage resistance against gunners. So to wrap this video up, we're going to take a quick look at the other version of this build. It's not very different. It's just 3 points that we've moved around, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But basically, we're dropping counterfire, rending strikes, and target down and we're going to replace those with dead shot and duck and dive. We do need to have that extra point to get the node for duck and dive. And what that does is dead shot is going to give us 25% crit, a big reduction in our sway, basically the spread of the shots. It makes the bolter substantially more accurate. And having that 25% extra crit is really helpful, especially when you pair it with duck and dive, because duck and dive is going to be giving you a lot of stamina back, because avoiding ranged fire, it counts things like using the dodge, sliding, even just sprinting. All of these count towards duck and dive, and they will all give you that stamina back. So it is a pretty easy way to keep Deadshot going, and this is a very viable way to run the bolter. Now, for the perks and blessings, we're going to be making a small change. We're going to be dropping Pinning Fire. This does hurt a little bit because you're losing 25% damage, essentially, when you have it fully stacked. But we're going to be replacing it with Surgical, and this is really going to help out with doing a lot of crit damage. Like, our crit chance is going to be crazy when we have Deadshot with Surgical. You're going to be critting all the time when you're ADSing. This does make your hip fire weaker. It's not as good as the first version of the build, but it is better at kind of hanging back and playing a little bit of that like designated marksman role, where you're picking off elites and specials from a distance and kind of staying a little bit more safe. So you won't be using the hipfire as often. So getting those crits, the bolter does have a reasonably good crit modifier to it, so having those crits is really nice. It does allow you to do things like 2-shot crushers if you run Carapace as one of your perks. But personally, I would recommend actually running Carapace and Flak Armor for this version. I don't think that Maniac is as necessary because you're going to be critting so much, and when you're hip firing, you're firing 2 shots anyway, so you're going to be killing them in one volley regardless. So you don't need Maniac damage as much with this version, and you can swap that out for Unyielding or Carapace or really whatever you want. If you want to just run flat elite damage, that's also good too. For the Curios, there's only a small change. We are going to be dumping the Toughness Curio for an additional Stamina Curio. This is just going to make Deadshot a little bit easier to use. If you're good with Deadshot, you can get away with just having 1. But if you really want to make the most out of it, run 2 Stamina Curios, but the perks are going to be the same. Before I forget, just to talk briefly about melee weapons, really what you need in this bolter build with Executioner Stance, you need something that can very quickly kill chaff enemies that are near you. So a couple of good options for this are the Mark 6 Power Sword, the Mark 3 is good too, the Rashad Axe, the Cadia Chainsword, and the Munitorum Sapper Shovel, the standard version. These are all ones I've tested out and I do really like. I feel like the Power Sword, especially the Mark 6, kind of works the best because it just kills everything around you so fast, and it also has the option to deal with like heavy armor. The Rashad can also do that pretty well. The Cadia Mark 13G is not as good. You can build it to do that, but like I said, really what we're looking for is a weapon that can quickly clear chaff enemies off of us and can like block effectively. Basically, we only need it as a defensive weapon. We're going to be killing anything that's big and scary with our bolter, so our melee weapon should reflect that. So that's the build. That's two different versions of it, and like I said, you have at least 3 points that you can pull out and play with. You could probably make room for more if you're willing to drop certain things, but this is how I like to play the bolter, and I've spent the past week, one of the reasons it's taken so long to get this video, is just spamming games, spending time in the Psychanium, just trying to figure out the way to make the bolter work. And I didn't want to make it be a gimmick, where it was like, oh, this is really good at killing bosses, but good luck getting through the mission. No, this is a solid build that works in Auric Maelstrom and can carry games at the highest level of difficulty. So I'm very proud to bring this to y'all, and I'm very happy for any of you that have made it to the end of this video that you've gotten the enjoyment, hopefully, out of watching this guide. And I hope that when you try this out in your own games, you get that same feeling of fuck yes that I did from running the bolter in a way that actually works really, really well. So yeah, anyway, thanks again for joining me, and for upcoming content, we have part 2 of my Ultimate Veteran Guide, where we're basically going to be making a tier list of the ranged weapons, and I'll be talking about, you know, why each of them is pretty good. Spoiler, there's not really any weapons in F tier, but aside from that, I also have an Infiltrate build coming out soon, and yeah, I'm just excited to bring y'all more content. I'm sorry this one has taken so long to get out, but it was a big challenge trying to figure out how to make the bolter work. So yeah, once again, thanks for joining me. Now go out there and slay some heretics. Caiaphas, out.